by now, should be warm. Tyres, well, under these wet conditions, I don't know how much difference it's really going to make, the fact that they've cruised around here at a relatively slow speed for a lap or two. But the big factor today, of course, is the weather, the great leveller. Interesting configuration we have on the lineup due to the system of qualifying this time, which has been a mixture of semi-finals with grid positions determined by practice laps in the dry. We've got some very fast drivers towards the front. We've also got some very slow drivers, and we've got a bit of a mixture. In fact, right on the very front row of the grid, we've got 63 Phil White, the speckled car on the inside there, who's put up a very good time in practice, and a slower man right alongside him, Nigel Murphy, but who goes extremely well in the wet. Here comes the pace car, and it's go. Well, that's a good start. The very first opportunity the start marshal had to let them go for this 1988 Avon Tyres Ken Cam's Hot Rod World Championship. He's able to get them underway, and we haven't had the first bend pile-ups that we had yesterday in the two semi-finals. So that must be good. The pace, of course, is not going to be as fast under these conditions. Having said that, of course, everyone is on wet tyres. The track is pretty wet, and that tends to mean a bit more grip than if it's lightweight conditions. Over in the 351 car, we've got a camera, and of course, we've got Barry Lee. What's it like out there now in these early stages, Barry?
Yeah, the weather conditions are very, very bad. I don't know if you can see now. I'm having to squat down and look through a little tiny 2-inch slit. I'm watching my brakes because they haven't come on yet, because they haven't really warmed up. The problem being is now the front pack are breaking away from me. I'm a little bit busy now, so I'll talk to you later on.
Well, Barry's obviously got his hands full there. He's got a lot of spray coming back into the car there. The conditions obviously are going to be a little difficult, but as I've said, with the track being as wet as it is, at least gives the tyres some opportunity to cut through and find some grip. So let's now have a look at the situation. We've already got 4 laps gone. It's a 75-lap event, and that very distinctive spotted car at the front there will be easy for you to see. That is 63 Phil White in second place. Sitting right on his tail is 498 Nigel Murphy. Then we've got car number 286, Steve Burgess. Right in behind him, 249, Stuart Morton. And in fact, it was Stuart Morton in 249 who put up the fastest time of all in practice at 15.19 seconds for this circuit. And the 63 Phil White car was only just behind with 15.21. But that, of course, was in the dry yesterday. Today is another kettle of fish. Barry Lee going very well at the moment. Up there in 6th place. Ormond Christie is not far behind them, but back up at the front of the race. Still that distinctive car of Phil White, one by one, picking his way past the slower cars. Put a back marker between him now and the second place man. That's never a bad move. It gives you a little bit of a breather. A bit of wiggling around there, and the wet conditions, and it really is very wet. The drivers are just being bathed in a constant spray of muddy water. White finding it going a little difficult. He's got the 386 car of Anthony van den Ottelaar from Holland and 809, the Scottish car of Brian Leckie. Right in front of him, Nigel Murphy is back right on his tail in 498. 286 is still there. And we've got to go quite a bit way back to find Paul Grimer in 8. 351 Barry Lee. And then 249 is Stuart Morton. Behind him comes 962 Ormond Christie. Little bit of touching there. That's Brian Leckie from Scotland, with Phil White breathing right down his neck. And perhaps Brian Leckie, I think, will get a blue flag from the starting marshal in a minute or two, which tells him he's got to move over and give way, because he's a long way behind, and in fact he's done it off his own back without the blue flag, maybe. And Nigel Murphy knows that he just can't afford to let Phil White get away. He's got to sit on his tail. If a gap opens, he must go with it. He must follow him through. So these are the first two then, 63 and 498, followed by 286 and 306 George Polly, which is really a quite a surprise. 3:06, George Polly, while we've been looking at these other cars, has worked his way up from almost the back of the grid, and there he is now, right up behind Barry Lee. Now that's a tremendous performance from George Polly, because I have to say that many of us had written George off, because in the first of the semi-finals yesterday, George Polly, in fact, had the wrong tyres on and pulled out of the first qualifier yesterday, and that meant he had very, very few points, and he started almost at the back of the field. But here he is now, right behind Barry Lee. Let's see if we can go and join Barry Lee now in the 351 car with 3:06 George Polly right behind him. Barry.
Yeah, I don't know if you just handed it over to me, but Grimer's a lot slower than me. I can't see, I've given him a couple of little taps, but I daren't do any more than I'm doing now, because I'll get blue flag. But I'm all over him like a bloody rash, and he won't get out the solid way. Why, my son? See what I mean? He's braking miles too early, he's very nervous, he's very twitchy, but the leading cars are now getting away from me. Oh, he's gone sideways. No, just cannot do it. I dare move out to the outside, because there's a lot of mud out there now.
We're not yet halfway, and George Polly in the 3:06 car, last year's winner, the defending title holder, is already up into 5th place. And prepared to have a go for 4th. He's prepared to go right round the outside of 351 and 8 together to see if he can do it. And the net result of a massive back markers further back is the leader is still where he was. George Polly nearly comes unstuck as he tries that dangerous route down the outside, but George is not done yet. He is determined to show them that that position, that starting position at the back of the grid is not going to be too big a handicap. And look at him forcing his way through there. He's right upsides. He squeezes through a gap that really didn't exist, but he created it for himself. And he and Barry Lee have gone nipping through to make sure they stay right on terms with Paul Grimer, and in fact the whole field has now closed up. Because while we've been watching the antics of George Polly and Barry Lee, a whole group of back markers has indeed slowed down Phil White, and that has meant the whole field has now telescoped into the space of about 20 yards, and George Polly tries it wide, a beautiful drift right around the outside, but unfortunately the width of the drift took him so wide that he really didn't gain a great deal of advantage by it, which was a great pity, because it was a brave try, and I mean brave, because that is very slippery on the outside, and that safety fence is very, very hard. What a scrap this is turning into. So we've still got 63, Phil White, up front. Here he is. He's there. And let's just look a little bit further back. We've got one back marker between him and 498, Nigel Murphy. The Peter Grimer car is there. In fact, 498 has just moved ahead of him. We've then got 2 more back markers, and then this really tough competition between 8, Paul Grimer, 3:06, George Polly, and 3:51, Barry Lee. 3 of the most experienced drivers in this race today, really giving us absolutely every penny, and Paul Grimer has gone. The pressure was a little too much, and that has put Paul Grimer down about 6 places. It's let George Polly in 3:06 up now into 3rd place. It's put 3:51 Barry Lee 4th, and then we go back to Orman Christie in 9:62, and then 3:02. But I think that really, and 3:86, that's Anthony van der Ottelaar from Holland. He has gone as well. But what a race. Since 1976, no driver has won this race starting further back than 9th position on the grid, and that's exactly the position that George Polly started in 1976, 12 years ago. And of course today, George Polly started only 6 cars from the back of the grid. And look at this determination. He's not going to lose his grip on this championship as he challenges Nigel Murphy for the 2nd place in this race. Here they come, Polly on the outside, and Murphy has to give way, and George Polly, as we hit lap 42 of the 75, is into the lead, and he's only got 1 more man to pass, and that man is a quarter of a lap in front of him, and there he is, 63, Phil White. 1, 2, 3 back markers between George Polly and the leader, and still a little less than a quarter of a lap is the margin that George has got to make up. So there they are. Top of the picture on the right is the leader, and George Polly there on the inside gets past yet another back marker to go a little closer. And there's another one picked off, slowly but surely. That leaves one back marker now between 3:06 and the leader 63, and that's the man who spun out and in fact created the chance for George to go by earlier on, number 8, Paul Driver. This time Paul lets him through very courteously, then drops it behind to slipstream him. And it won't be too long now before we can see both the first and second conveniently in the same picture. There they are. That's the leader, that's the second. Those two are quite a way clear of the rest of the field. Cool, calm and collected is Phil White. Didn't take part in the race last year. He was away from the meeting due to illness, but he's certainly making up for it this year. Man of several talents. In fact, last weekend at Hensford, the track up near Birmingham, he carried off the World Championship in the National Super Rod Formula, and he's now striving to make it the double in the National Hot Rod Formula. There he is, 63, the 863 Paul Whiteman car from Bathgate in Scotland, holding him up just a little, and George Polly, a little way back, is getting closer. There's George. Just coming into the picture. There's 63, there's the back marker, and there's George Polly on the right. Same old problem, you just managed to knock off a couple of back markers, and then blow me, there's two more there. Let's see how George Polly disposes of these two. You want to get past quickly. One of them looks like, oh,